The world didn't expect it. In 2023, Airbus was celebrating one of its biggest victories in years, a record-breaking $20 billion order from China, finalized with French President Emmanuel Macron himself on the scene. For Airbus, this wasn't just a contract. It was a crown jewel. China's aviation market was booming. Boeing was still stumbling from safety scandals, and Airbus seemed perfectly positioned to dominate the skies of Asia for decades to come. But then, just 2 years later, Airbus stunned everyone. Instead of deepening its presence in China, the company announced something no one saw coming: a brand new parts manufacturing facility in India. Overnight, the narrative shifted. What once looked like an unshakable Europe-China aerospace alliance suddenly felt uncertain. The question practically wrote itself. Why would Airbus risk walking away from what it called the most important aviation market of the next 2 decades? Was this about politics, pure economics, or was Airbus playing a deeper game, balancing two Asian giants in a race for global influence? At the top of the aviation world, there are only two names that matter: Boeing and Airbus. For decades, Boeing reigned supreme. It wasn't just a company, it was the pride of American industry, supplying over half of the world's commercial aircraft and setting the gold standard in aerospace engineering. But Airbus, born out of European cooperation in 1970, chipped away at Boeing's dominance year after year. Today, they're neck and neck. Boeing still holds around 38% of the global aircraft market, while Airbus commands about 28%. Together, they provide nearly 2/3 of all commercial planes in the world. Every contract, every factory, and every incident shifts the balance in this high-stakes rivalry. So when Airbus locked in that $20 billion deal with China in 2023, it was more than a financial win. It was a strategic strike against Boeing, which had been battered by repeated crises. The cracks in Boeing's empire began with the 737 MAX disaster. Between 2018 and 2019, two tragic crashes in Indonesia and Ethiopia killed 346 people. Investigations revealed deep flaws in Boeing's software systems, safety culture, and even in the oversight of the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration. The fallout was brutal. A near-global grounding of the 737 MAX that lasted almost 2 years, shaking customer confidence worldwide. Airlines canceled orders. Pilots grew wary. Passengers started checking which aircraft model they were flying before boarding. And just when Boeing thought it had stabilized, more problems surfaced. By 2024, the company suffered 5 major safety incidents in a single month, including a mid-air door panel blowout and an engine fire. These weren't isolated mistakes. They hinted at systemic weaknesses in Boeing's manufacturing process. Governments responded quickly. More than 15 countries imposed bans or restrictions on Boeing aircraft. Airlines began looking elsewhere, and Airbus, with its cleaner record, was the obvious choice. In many ways, Airbus didn't win because it outperformed Boeing. It won because Boeing lost the trust it had built over generations. And in China, where air travel demand was exploding, the timing couldn't have been more perfect. For aircraft manufacturers, China is the ultimate prize. With 1.4 billion people, a rapidly expanding middle class, and aggressive infrastructure growth, China is on track to become the world's largest air travel market. Airbus itself projects that Chinese passenger numbers will grow by over 5% annually for the next 2 decades, almost twice the global average. That growth translates into real orders. By 2042, China is expected to need more than 9,000 new planes, nearly a quarter of all aircraft delivered worldwide. To put that into perspective, 1 out of every 4 new commercial aircraft will be bought by Chinese airlines. Airbus saw this coming years ago. It opened its first final assembly plant outside Europe in Tianjin, where it produced A320s at a steady pace of about 50 per year. As demand surged, Airbus expanded the facility to handle the A321, a longer-range aircraft. After the 2023 mega deal, Airbus even announced a third assembly line in China. Everything suggested the company was embedding itself as a permanent partner in China's aviation future. Yes, China was developing its own passenger jet, the C919, through state-owned COMAC. But production was limited, with only about 20 aircraft being rolled out annually. That wasn't nearly enough to meet demand. Airbus wasn't just filling a short-term gap, it was securing long-term dominance, which is exactly why Airbus's pivot to India in 2025 seemed so baffling. One day, China was the undisputed future of Airbus. The next, India was suddenly the new focus. There was no detailed press release, no grand public explanation, just an announcement a major Airbus parts facility would open in India. Why? The answer starts with India's own aviation boom. In 2023, India overtook China as the world's most populous nation. And, unlike in previous decades, its aviation industry was no longer a side story. It was becoming a global headline. That year alone, India's domestic air travel surged nearly 50%. Airports overflowed, ticket demand skyrocketed. Delays became routine because the system couldn't keep up. The government responded with one of the most ambitious aviation infrastructure plans in modern history. 80 new airports within 5 years, and a goal of acquiring up to 1,700 new aircraft. This was too big for either Airbus or Boeing to ignore, and Boeing struck first. In what became the largest deal in its history, Boeing agreed to deliver 220 aircraft to India in a $30 billion package. At the same time, it launched a new manufacturing site in India to produce vertical tail fins, its largest facility outside the United States. Airbus knew it couldn't afford to fall behind. If Boeing established dominance in India, it could tilt the balance of power in Asia. So Airbus's decision to build in India was less about abandoning China, and more about keeping Boeing in check. But there's a problem. Building in India isn't the same as building in China. For decades, China has invested heavily in its industrial capacity. From electronics to railways to aerospace, it built an integrated system with advanced factories, experienced engineers, and reliable supply chains. Airbus's assembly line in Tianjin didn't appear overnight. It was supported by a vast ecosystem of suppliers and trained workers. India, on the other hand, is still catching up. Its economy is massive, but services like tech and finance dominate. Manufacturing only accounts for about a quarter of its GDP. Many factories are small or mid-sized, relying on outdated equipment and limited funding. Skilled aerospace engineers are in short supply. These gaps matter. Unlike smartphones or cars, aircraft parts require near-perfect precision, world-class quality control, and absolute reliability. Even a small defect can cost lives. India's struggles are visible in its own aerospace projects. The Tejas fighter jet program, launched in 2001 as a milestone for national defense, has been plagued with setbacks. Design flaws, technical issues, and repeated delays meant the aircraft took decades to reach limited service. And in 2024, one even crashed during a test flight in front of Prime Minister Modi and top military officials. That's the industrial environment Airbus is stepping into. A country with enormous ambition, but still an unproven capacity to handle the demanding standards of global aerospace. And there's another challenge, one that has nothing to do with factories or engineers. India's regulatory and legal environment has a reputation for being unpredictable, especially for foreign companies. Over the last decade, thousands of multinational firms have poured into India, hoping to tap its massive consumer base. But, many of them quickly ran into problems. Apple, Xiaomi, Samsung, Nokia all faced sudden fines, tax probes, or policy shifts that disrupted their operations. Xiaomi, for example, rose to the top of India's smartphone market only to be accused of tax violations and hit with multi-billion-dollar penalties. By 2023, India had taken regulatory or legal action against more than 2,800 multinational corporations. The Financial Times described India's business climate as a story of blood and tears. Compare this with China. Yes, its business rules are strict, but they are consistent. Contracts are usually honored. Logistics are efficient. In India, Airbus risks dealing with a maze of state-level laws, unpredictable red tape, and abrupt policy reversals. For a company that depends on precision planning, that could prove costly. So, was Airbus wise to pivot toward India, or is it stepping into a trap? On the surface, the move makes sense. India is the world's most populous nation with explosive growth in air travel. Aircraft orders are rising faster than almost anywhere else. Diversifying away from China also protects Airbus from geopolitical risks. After all, putting all your eggs in one basket, even if that basket is as big as China, carries dangers of its own. But underneath the numbers lies real uncertainty. In China, Airbus had scale, consistency, and years of experience operating smoothly. In India, it faces untested capacity, uneven regulations, and an unpredictable business environment. If everything goes right, Airbus could secure a powerful foothold in an emerging superpower and keep pace with Boeing's aggressive expansion. But if things go wrong, it could waste years of effort, lose resources, and hand Boeing the advantage just as the American giant begins to recover. And maybe that's the bigger story here. This isn't just about Airbus, Boeing, or even airplanes. It's about how global corporations navigate a world defined by shifting power centers, fragile alliances, and rapidly changing rules of engagement. So, what do you think? Did Airbus make a brilliant move by betting on India's rise? Or is it risking too much by stepping away from its proven stronghold in China? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive into the global forces shaping the 21st century.